To turn off, doesn't like Twitter. All right, we're live. Ready to rock in just a moment.
Ready.
Okay, let's get going here. I'm going to dig right in. We've got an exciting session 3. Is that where we're at now? Session 3, right, Tyler?
Yeah, we're on the third session.
And really excited to dig into a topic, which I don't think, as we think of business strategy, we don't always think about, well, we actually have to pay for these strategies. How do we make sure that we're budgeting and planning and forecasting and can do all the things that we want to do within the next budget planning sessions? And so typically the fun stuff is thinking about what we could do and dreaming and planning and really kind of putting those strategies together can be quite creative and fun and exciting. And then we get into budgets. and then it digs into, oh my gosh, can we really find the funding? Are we going to get enough funding? Are we going to drive enough revenue? Are we going to write all the things that ties into strategic budgeting? And so this is really where, you have time, resource, and um, budget constraints that can really determine what you can do within your strategies and what you can't do. And so really being clear on that. And how do we leverage AI to be able to do strategic budgeting? That's going to be the fun that we're having today.
Right.
There's a lot of different approaches, a lot of different things that we can talk about, but we're going to try and keep this today very simplified approach, like just starting to think about it. And really looking forward to our conversations that, like I say, these are always fun for me as we have these conversations, Tyler, and talking about it.
Yeah, and I think the big opportunity at this point is for those folks who kind of maybe they're, you've been responsible for a P&L for a while, or you've wanted to kind of help out with it, help your boss or your direct reports who are handling this, and you're just not the budgeting person. But I think the biggest opportunity during this point where you have all this AI available to help simplify tasks and explain things and do tasks for you, that it's the opportunity to become a budgeting person. If you're not, kind of a numbers person now and you're like, oh, just make somebody else do that, then I think the opportunity is here.
Yeah, I think that's the funnest thing of AI in general is it makes you an expert in anything.
Yeah.
It's how we're going to talk about today, how you can leverage it to, like, if I kind of shy away, myself included, like kind of shy away from the numbers, right? Now you can lean into it and start to become familiar. Oh, I don't understand this term. I don't know the risks, the mitigation plans, what we should be thinking about. It just drives, it's like your little budgeting assistant as we go forward. So excited for the conversation as we dig into budgeting.
Yeah.
So before we get started, though, as we do with all of our sessions, we want to be able to provide this offer to everyone. We'll talk about it again as we get down towards the end of this session, but really want to start with this up front about the huge opportunity Tyler is offering for a free 45-minute consult. Take advantage of this, right? Because we cannot get through everything in a 1-hour webinar in talking about doing strategic planning in AI, what tools to use, what works, what you do have, what you don't have, what are you looking, what are your needs. You really want to bring in a consultant as you do this transformation. So take advantage of that, hit the QR code that's listed here and book that time. There's only so many hours in the day for Tyler, so you want to be one of the first ones to get in and get on his schedule. So also with that, really contact us to discuss your AI transformation needs. We do workforce upskilling. There's current budgets available. If you are in the state of Utah, we work with a program called Custom Fit here in Utah as one of their training providers for AI upskilling for your teams. And lastly, I will add, we've had a few people reach out over these last few weeks and say, well, what about not just my work, but I want to train individually. Tyler also offers a individual training program. So get time on his calendar, regardless of what role you're in, individual or within your companies. If you're looking to create training plans, reach out to us. We would love to talk to you.
Yep.
So with that out there, let's actually dig in. Let's start working through all of this.
All right. So we're going to be talking about using AI for strategic budgeting today, and we'll talk about some tools, some strategies, some methods, and some ideas for you to use AI. We'll talk about the difference between traditional budgeting and strategic budgeting, and we'll add this new layer on of artificial intelligence. It's gonna be fun.
And can I say something here? Because it just triggered for me. We're talking strategic budgeting, but having just talked about like the individual, your personal budgeting, right? Like ideas that you can there's so many applications here. We're really going to focus on like a business side of it, but just this is a good understanding of like just things you can learn, tips, tricks, just use it as an assistant as you go forward. Just wanted to put that out there.
Absolutely, and just because we haven't really covered that very much with the deck that we have ahead, I just wanted to throw out there a couple of really simple tools that you can get started with today. There's an app called Mint for personal budgeting, and it's integrated with the banking, I believe, and it's very simple and easy to use for individuals and families. And then what we use is we just use a Google Sheet. We just pull it up and we can share it with each other, my wife and I, and it ends up being this really transparent, like super easy to use. Like it's just a list of all of the expenses and all the income. Like it's just super simple. So, and AI can help you use those as well. So here we go back into the business realm. When we talk about traditional versus strategic budgeting, if you think about traditional budgeting, it's basically this idea that you have, okay, I've got all these expenses, and then I'm just going to have this kind of growth multiplier number for each expense. So maybe, okay, we're having a 10% increase in revenue, so I'm just going to increase all of my expenses by 10%. And that's like kind of a simple way to do it. Maybe that's kind of a starting point for you to kind of get a feel for things. But we also call that a peanut butter spread approach. We talk about management theory and the theory of constraints. It's one of the basic strategic management theories. And basically the theory of constraints says, look, you should look for your opportunities. What are the things that are stopping your business from growing or functioning or delivering the intended impact? Find those things and then apply a disproportionate amount of resources, a greater portion of resources towards those things. And that's a way to strategically drive change. So instead of kind of having this peanut butter spread approach where you're like, okay, everything gets 5% more, everything gets 10% more, you can look at it and say, okay, where are the real bottlenecks? Where are the constraints? Where are our biggest opportunities? And that's where we get over here into strategic budgeting, where you're thinking, okay, where does our organization need to go? How does it need to change? And how can I do that? And one of the super basic ways as we kick this off to start looking at that is, okay, if I was going to give less budget to one area and more budget to a different area in order to drive the business in a different direction, you might say, okay, well, if we cut this budget from 5% of sales down to 2% of sales, how are we going to do that? How are we going to function with a smaller budget in that area? And that's an excellent question for AI.
Right.
In some studies recently, we've seen that when AI is compared to humans in their ability to come up with a lot of ideas and the creativity of the ideas, that AI typically wins. And so you have to be the intentional one and ask it the right questions. But as you do that, you'll get many more ideas and much better ideas by using AI to come up with solutions to those changes in the budget that might otherwise be really big pills to swallow.
Yeah. And we were just having a conversation on this that I think is relevant for what we're talking about, is this mindset shift that's happening that we all have to make. And we both had this experience this last week where we were looking at doing budget projections or figuring out how to use some mathematical equations within spreadsheets, and like, hey, can you give me what the formula is? Of course it can give us the formula. And then I was trying to go and use the formula and edit the sheet, right? And I had to stop and go, why am I spending 15 to 20 minutes to figure out how to take that formula and put it in the sheet, even though it taught me and I'm learning, I'm like, I can just upload the sheet and have AI do it.
Just do the whole thing.
I'm like, why am I even wasting the time? And it's this crazy mindset shift that we're all having to go through of like, it's similar to when you go from like being a individual contributor to a leader, you're having to learn how to delegate to someone else. You need to learn how to delegate and what you can delegate to AI. And this is a perfect example of that. Is sometimes it's great to learn and learn the functions and features and things you can do, but sometimes you can just turn it over and let AI do it. And just it was kind of that aha. And then we were talking, and Tyler, you had that same experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I told you, I remembered you saying that, and I was like, "Oh yeah, you shared like that same sequence with me."
And I think everybody's doing that. You get in, you're like, "Oh wow, I can do this and I can learn." But then it's just this. We're all on this journey together of looking past how we've done things to how we could do things, and that's kind of what we're wanting to help with. Is through that AI transformation journey that we're all going through.
Yeah. It's wonderful. So let's talk about 4 different AI enhancements in budgeting. First, we've got this idea that we're looking at leveraging the historical data for insightful trends. And so, like, one way that you can literally do this is you can take your budget from last year, from years past, you upload it, and then just ask questions about it. Another is that you can take the specific row, so the specific ledger item or the specific group of ledger items, and you can copy and paste that in or put it in a separate sheet and upload that and ask specific questions about that. For example, what opportunities do you see? How can we increase this form of revenue or decrease this expense? What are some risks that you see that we might watch out for and plan for and mitigate? So looking at that historical data is something that you can do wholesale or line by line. We talk about AI assists with the predictive modeling for scenario planning and helps prioritize crucial investments. And I wanted to, Trina, you have a great example of this predictive modeling. Like, we can use a lot of different types of formulas for this, and I wanted you to share that experience you had when you're working on your own budget.
Yeah, I was working on our forecast and strategic planning for Rise Next. Right, this is something everybody should be doing, hopefully. And I only know what I know so far, but I've had lots of schooling and whatnot, and I'm working on this forecast and putting it together. And to your point, it was kind of the peanut butter spread approach. And my son walks in and he sees what I'm doing, and I'm explaining, we're having this conversation about, kind of forecasting and what I'm doing. And he's like, well, why don't you use a log function? And I'm like, well, explain this more to me. Right. And he's like, your initial forecast, you're going to maybe have higher growth rates, especially as you're a startup or looking at that, but you're going to tailor off over time. So you're going to have a slope to that. And here's my son, my 20-year-old son, teaching me. It was a great example, but we did the same thing we talked about earlier of like, okay, let's use AI. And we brought in AI to the conversation. And so it was my son and I and AI having this discussion about what function would be the right one for the projections that we're doing, for the type of programs and initiatives we're looking to launch. And it was fun to learn along with him as using AI as like our trainer in the conversation.
Yeah. And so just when you're thinking about your budgeting process, whether you're midstream through this, you're just getting started, or you're just wrapping it up, think about, okay, what resources do I have available for this team, right? Well, I've got this person that works for me. I've got my boss that I've got to get approvals from, and then or the board. And then I've got, these other folks that can help contribute and take a second look at things, and just include AI. If you don't have a name for your, your favorite agent in ChatGPT, your custom GPTs yet, like, consider, that idea that, like, just as you'd think, okay, who could take a second look at this? Who might have some insights? I know people, they confide in me, like, hey, like, for really serious thing, I'll go to my CPA. But throughout the year, like I'm asking ChatGPT like things that I would typically take to a CPA.
Yeah.
And that's not financial advice, but if you're looking for a second opinion on things, it's a great resource.
Yeah.
And then so I talked about the theory of constraints, and just to jump into this a little further, so you've no doubt by now, by the time you get to budgeting, you've gone through this process of identifying, okay, what are the goals that we're setting up for this next year, and what are the obstacles that we need to overcome to get there. And so this theory of constraints is this way of saying, okay, well, we're going to need to increase the revenue here. We're going to need to decrease this cost of goods sold area over here. And when you're doing that, like I know that in my mind, when I'm helping businesses with this and I'm setting up this model or I'm advising them on how to how to hit their targets better, or how to be more efficient in certain areas in order to hit those targets, that the question is constant of, okay, well, how are we going to do that? Right. And so just going back to that, that expert that's over here, always available, AI, and being able to say, hey, what are 10 ideas that you have for decreasing this type of cost? Or another one is, I love using Perplexity. Perplexity is a model that goes right to the web and basically utilizes the things that are currently on the web and brings those back for a nice search. You can do the same thing now with ChatGPT. If you're in the paid version, there's a little button that's called search, and it's a similar thing. Perplexity is a little more visual with the results, and it's free, but those are ways that you can say, oh, well, what are 5 different top technologies that I could use for a small business of, this many users in this industry for this particular purpose. And you can get a lot of ideas on how to operationally support your strategic goals.
Absolutely.
And finally, those what if scenarios. And if you haven't heard the story of the Black Swan, I think it was 1697. There was this explorer, and he was in Australia, and the people in Europe had only seen white swans up to that point, and it was like, I think they might have even had a term of like, oh, that's like at that point in time in history, the cultural interpretation of Black Swan was like, oh, that's something that absolutely does not exist.
Right.
And it was just so weird for them when this explorer found these black swans, and he sent back 3 different specimens to help like prove this concept. Like, look, here's the black swan, it's right here. And they would look at it and be like, wait, what? This is impossible. It was so confusing and so counterintuitive to them. But now we see this black swan as looking at back this whole story, like this really unexpected thing. What's that?
Pandemics, right?
The pandemic, right? Like the housing crisis of 2008. Like it was like, oh, like how could things go that wrong? Like how we could not have foreseen the pandemic. We could not have foreseen that technology companies would overhire during the pandemic, and then there's be all these layoffs. Like we could not have foreseen the accelerations and jumps in AI that have brought us into this new world.
Right.
So now we can look at it and say, okay, well, these things that were unforeseen that have very high impact, how can we treat those like opportunities?
Absolutely. And I think also on this, it's like thinking about the things that would keep you up at night if they happened. It's that risk mitigation and AI. And as I've been doing this, what are the things I need to be thinking about? Because it's hard to come up with scenario planning that you just may not know, but it's just asking AI, what are the potential risks? Like how much should I be putting in a rainy day fund or a safe mitigation planning so that if something happens, we can quickly pivot and we planned for those things up front. Those what if scenario planning as you go through this experience, it's being able to identify potential risks within our budgets and identify where those are.
Yeah, and some of the potential action items that could result from that is like you could ask AI like, hey, what are the risks here? What mitigations can I do? And you can also ask like, what conversations should I potentially begin early in the year, letting people know, hey, there's a 10% chance that I may need you to go to this other project or to help us out with this thing, talking to vendors about, potential needs that you may have, so that in the event that occurs, it's not a surprise.
Yeah. I mean, supply chain disruption was huge. So how do you put mitigation and budget planning for how can I pivot prior as part of your strategic planning process?
Exactly. In ChatGPT, like it's read like so many business books and blog articles and scripts from interviews, and so it has a lot of ideas for us on how to do that risk mitigation. So over to you, Trina.
Yeah, let's talk about this workflow now. So one of the things that we mentioned before, but I found this very beneficial as far as pulling together as many input variables as you can. It may not be just your budget spreadsheet, right, for the last 5 years to be able to be input from a financials perspective, but what's your corporate purpose? What's your mission? What industry are you in? Just really feeding the GPT as much information as you possibly can about your organization and where you have been, as well as those go forward initiatives that you're planning on, so that it knows kind of leveling up and understanding where you're at from a business and an organization. The more data, the better. And the more you can feed it, it's going to be able to give more accurate estimates on, okay, here's the industry, here's examples of other industry businesses, what they've done, here's what your goals are. I understand all of that. You're going to want to gather that data together to put it in. Hopefully, if you've gone through, like in our prior sessions, we talked about this just in building your strategic plans, your client sentiment data, your employee sentiment data, this is all going to come into play, right? So you hopefully have all that data ready when you're getting into budgeting. You're just going to be adding in the financial aspects of this as well.
Mm-hmm.
That way you'll get more accurate cost estimates. And then you're going to give ranges. So anytime you're doing your budget planning, you're going to say, this is my budget for, quarterly budgets, biannual, annual. What is that historical data, so that it knows based on an annual, revenue generation, here's where we were, here's what our operational expenses were, all your, cash flows and all of your financial data should be put into that, so that it knows, like, here's the time bound entries for that range, so that it can then forecast appropriately for the future. And then you're going to collaborate on it. I think we've talked a lot about this already, as far as once you have the data and it has the proposals, you're going to be having refined estimates. Don't just say, okay, there it is, go, right? Nothing in AI. I think this is, regardless of what you're asking, you should always question.
Mm-hmm.
We need to build this mindset of curiosity and questioning everything anymore.
I love it.
And so if we can set our mindset of, like, let's ask the questions, but then let's have a good discussion on it. It's not maybe always right.
Mm-hmm.
I threw this out there for tech moms, right? This last couple of weeks, and was using it to do our forecast planning for this year. It had a lot of the numbers correct, and then had some that were way off. So it's not perfect. Okay. So I want to make sure everybody's aware of that. But it was a great starting point, because it provided so many other perspectives that I hadn't thought of before, that need to be considered.
And we realized one thing that can be really helpful as you're it's kind of on like number one here, I guess, as you're inputting your variables, that when you upload a spreadsheet into ChatGPT, for example, if you have anything above the header rows, it may get confused on what the data is. But if you quickly, duplicate, let's say you've just made an export from QuickBooks, and you're like, okay, I just want to, throw this in and take a look at it and get some ideas. Delete the stuff above the header rows, and ChatGPT can just handle and understand it so much better.
Yeah, I think the formatting is what I had to learn. There's some data cleansing and data cleanup on your files. You can't just We use QuickBooks, and I had pulled just all of our prior budget years, our actuals data, right? P&L, all of this data.
Mhm.
The formatting I had to clean up because I'd thrown in some like prior tabs I was trying to pull from. There was some data cleansing you have to do as you're prepping for all of this. And so I think as we move forward and some of these platforms we'll talk about in a moment, some of the current financial platforms might start leveraging and embedding some of these AI functions. They're just not there today.
Yeah.
And so you do have to pull out your data, format it, cleanse it, then put it in. So there is some prep work as you start to go through this process today.
And that's when I discovered that I was trying to, so you know how sometimes, a lot of us have seen this, you do the export from QuickBooks and you've got this situation where your ledger columns are kind of split into like 5 different columns, and it
Mhm.
uses the Excel sheet to kind of do this indentation. And
Yes.
I was thinking, oh man, like I'll have ChatGPT do a formula to just grab whatever's in those columns and then add an indent so I can tell what's what still with it, and but it'll all be in one column and it'll be clean. And that's when and I did that, and then I was like, wait a minute, I bet I could just have it clean it up. And then I asked it, can you just clean this up? And it was like, yes, I will clean
Yes.
the data. And
Yeah.
it uses Python code, and it does a bunch of things, and it's like, here you go, here's your cleaned up data.
Oh my gosh. It's so the data cleansing. Can we just pause on this a moment because this has been such a big deal for us. Um, so we're running a data analytics course, and so a lot of our students are learning this, the amount of time and effort for data cleansing, right? And especially when it comes to spreadsheets and doing budgets and things like this. And they sent over this meme the other day, and it was a skeleton sitting trying to doing data cleansing because it's just like so exhausting and just drains the life out of you.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a huge opportunity within the AI, like starting to that mindset shift of like, oh, it can just do it for me.
Yeah.
I don't have to do all the data cleansing. I just need to tell it what to do and give it the format output I want. And like, hey, go remove all the white space from all these columns, right? Like go dedupe all of this list, right?
Mhm.
I think just that piece of it is a huge just productivity gain.
Yeah. And we were talking about this the other day, and we like this concept, the thing that makes this so easy, it's called natural language processing, or NLP. And so if you're reading an article, or you're looking at a new tool and it says, oh, like this uses natural language processing, it might sound like a machine learning term, and it kind of is, but really, like, it just means that you can type, and any in English or whatever language you prefer to type in, and
Mhm.
you're talking to the computer, and it does what you want. Kind of, it can understand just normal language that humans speak. It doesn't have to be in Python or C++ or SQL or anything like that.
And I can have as many typos as I want. Like that's the I
Right?
am the typo queen. So I love that I'm like, okay, it can and then fix it for me. So
Yeah. I love that. And it's almost like, you know, you like, normally when we're communicating with someone, we're like, oh, well, I should say please and thank you just enough. And I know, Trina, you prefer to use that with AI, but I'm like, I read a little bit. I'm like, I
you
don't
don't
think it
have to.
matters.
No, it's not learning from it or anything. It's just me feeling like I'm being nice.
Right. So maybe there's some psychological
Maybe
benefit
there
there,
is.
but there's not necessarily a technical benefit to being correct on your, to being polite and correct on your grammar and so it can save a lot of time to just,
Mhm.
okay, like, unless the misspelling creates a
Great.
difference, a semantic difference in the word.
Yeah.
You meant to put gate and you put Gabe or something like, so, but yeah, it can save so much time.
Yes. So I think that this is just a kind of next step on line item analysis, right? Just really those AI insights. What is it that we're going to get out of these when we put it in? What are the strategic goals? Do they align to what we're going to do? There's a number of initiatives that we're launching for this next year, and I think that This is always the challenge, like what we started off with, is you have to prioritize. We can't do everything. There's not enough time, resource, or budget for everything. So, what are going to be the projections that are going to drive the most revenue, that are going to drive the most funding, that are going to reduce the most operational costs when you're creating your budget, making sure that that's going in so that you can get that prioritization, making sure that you're focusing on the right things. And then you're going to have the human
Right.
refinement.
Go ahead.
That's actually, and collaborate on it. Here's the one thing that I think that as we put that together, and especially with finance and accounting, and sometimes there's a communication breakdown
Mm-hmm.
in explaining why the budgets ended up the way they were, and how do I message this back to my employee base or into my team as to why the budgets are the way they are, and did I take into consider the human element in my messaging? I can't tell you how many times, because I used to run eBay's PMO, and we had a technology PMO. We're running like 300 projects a year. We're having to do this prioritization and budgeting and trade-offs and discussion. And the breakdowns usually in being able to get the employees to buy off on the projects was because they felt like they were being robbed from a budgetary standpoint because it wasn't communicated clearly on why we got to that decision. And so using that collaborative process to be able to have the discussions, but then like, how do I message this out to my employee base to get buy-in? Because all of this is going to matter when it goes to execution,
Mm-hmm.
right? Why did we have these staff changes and trade-off in our budget planning? And how is that going to drive? Like, how do I message that back out? So I think not only as you're creating your budgets, but as you're executing and putting those into action, how can you leverage some of the content and messaging benefits of AI in your delivery?
Mm-hmm. And even just asking, as you make these budget changes, you can ask the AI, like, hey, what are the things that might be sensitive for
Yeah.
my employees? You can feed it your employee survey data, so it kind of understands the things that people are concerned about, the things that people are grateful for, the things they complain about, etc. And how your employees or your customers are feeling. And then you can ask, based on these budget changes, what are the sensitive areas that I'll need to explain and share reasoning for, and how can I how can I write those communications so that it can support this process in myriad ways.
Yeah. All right, let's go. I think we
Oh,
get to
we,
talk about
we
clones now.
all right, so I'm so excited for this part, and we kind of hit on this in the last, one of your stakeholders certainly are your employees, another is your customers. But you can also look at this in terms of individual. So let's say you've got to present your budget to the board or your boss, or your peers and your bosses. So thinking about, okay, who are the people in the room who are going to have an opinion on this, and what can I do to prepare for the holes that they might poke in this, and just the way that they think, and their personalities, and the types of things that they look for, their expertise, etc. So what you can do is you can actually go to their LinkedIn profiles, and you can, those three little dots, you click those three little dots on their profile page at the top there, and you can download that profile as a PDF. You can do that for any LinkedIn profile. And you can, once you have that, you can grab any transcripts that you have. And Trina and I, and a lot of the people now, as they can see, like, they're bringing an AI transcriber to every call. It's free. It doesn't cost anything, and it's automatic. Just automatically comes to all the calls. It records the whole thing. And if somebody says, hey, uh, I'd like to not record this call, is that okay? Of course, you don't record the call. Or if you sense that there could be any kind of sensitivity, you can ask, hey, I my call recorder, it comes, it transcribes every call just to help me follow up and stuff. If you have any sensitivity around that, I can turn it off right now. That's just fine. It allows them an out, right? But I think that more and more it just makes sense to bring this, if everybody could have a free note taker, then
Mm-hmm.
why wouldn't you do that, right? So bringing that in gives you this opportunity. You can have 1, 2, 3, or more calls with that person and just download that transcript. So we use Fathom. There's tons of others. There's Read, and Soars, one that you just stumbled upon, started using, right, Trina?
Yep.
And so once you have those transcripts, and I would say the more the better, because it gets, people will share their concerns. They'll share, they have conversational patterns. They share stories. They share their values. And the more information that you can have on a person, the better, right? And so whether it's a group of people and you upload all that information, or whether you're just thinking about, okay, it's your boss, and you can make literally a clone of your boss by uploading all this into a custom GPT, or in Claude does the same thing. And you can have this, and basically as a pre-check before you show them something, and say, hey, what questions is this person going to ask me, right?
What holes are they going to poke in my presentation?
Exactly. And
yeah,
by doing that, it makes it so that it doesn't waste their time, right? So if there's anything that can, if there's anything that you can do to flatter a person and to show them respect, is to save them some time. And so you can let them know, like, hey, just so you know, like, before we've met here today, like, I created an AI clone of you, and I went through and
that's now the new biggest form of flattery. It's like, hey, I cloned you.
I cloned you. I did everything I can. It brought up several issues that I've worked to fix. And, by the way, like, so this is what we're talking about. And these are the issues that I've addressed since your clone brought these up. So
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So it's this huge opportunity to do this simulation, and then to align with the decisions and priorities of those stakeholders that you're working with.
Absolutely. And it's so fun to think about. And there are some of these platforms that we're starting to partner with that are really incredibly powerful, not just from like recording and transcripts, but the emotional state. We're starting to get, I'm not going to get too side railed here, but this idea of understanding the perspective. It's anytime you present, right? And one use case that's coming to mind is investor relations. If I'm a startup and I'm doing pitch decks and I'm trying to think about how my potential funders what they're going to be considering, it's a great way to prep on, what our forecasts are, what our financial projections are. How did I come up with that? Like, this is a great exercise in just preparing and using this as you start to, vocalize your budgets and financial planning.
Yeah. I love it.
So I did want to share some of the research I've done on different AI-powered budgeting and planning systems. There's a few that are out there that do this at a, more of an enterprise level. I just honestly haven't used any of these directly, but I want to make sure that people are aware of them. Anaplan is one. These are really strategic scenario planning capabilities. Adaptive Insights is another, and Profix. These are ones where if you are looking for a tool and you have the budget, right, to be able to get a more extensive suite of scenario planning, forecasting. There's others that do this for sales, right? There's a lot of these different platforms. We're going to be talking about some of these in the future, but really these are some that you can look at. From our perspective right now, this is shifting so fast that learning to just use the basics and what's out there for, your chat GPTs or Perplexity, just using some of these tools that have free versions that you can do research and learn from, where you don't have to invest a lot from a financial perspective. We're kind of, everybody's coming from a different place in their journey. So we wanted to provide both of those perspectives on tool sets and what you can do, but just knowing that you can start doing this now. I think we've called that. And we've had some great response, by the way, Tyler, of people that have watched our webinar and said, oh, I just need to get started. Okay. And then they call me later and they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I could do this or write my curriculum or do some of these planning steps. That it's just, once you start, you can't stop. I
Yes.
I don't know how I functioned before, honestly.
Right? It's just crazy to think about, like, what was it like before smartphones? What was it like before computers? What was
Yeah.
it like before AI? And I just wanted to pull this out really quick with tools like Profix here. You see it, real-time financial modeling, or sorry, monitoring, offering a clear view of financial health. Like those sorts of tools. A good friend of mine, is a hiking climbing buddy. Um, you know, his job is cybersecurity, and he's worked on some of the biggest financial breaches in the world. They'll call him in, and he'll advise, and he'll help, figure out next steps, and um, monitoring like things like your security, your finances. Like it used to be more expensive, and some of these tools, again, neither Trina and I have used these specific tools, but some of the tools that are coming out now, they
Mhm.
can decrease your risk by a lot, and they can help just
Absolutely.
like the dashboards that they provide. Like I've seen a lot of these tools where you plug them in and you give them the right information, and they're just giving you this super simple dashboard to where you can see, like, oh, there's a big red flag there.
Yeah.
It's very visual, it's very simple to see, and then you can call in, an expert and say, hey, I'm seeing a red flag. I've hooked this up to my bank accounts and whatever, and my credit cards, and I'm seeing this big red flag. Can you do something about it for me, right? And so it gives you the ability to know when to call in the expert, versus, if you
Until it's
hadn't
too
done that, yeah, till it's too late, right? So, or till it's very regrettably later than than you would have hoped. So
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if everybody's had that happen, but I've been hacked and had, access to my financials where they faked a contractor and started sending money out of my business account. So it's painful, right? So I think we should, I'm going to be talking Thursday with a identity and security specialist. So we're going to be getting into some of these things,
mhm.
there's a deeper discussion on, is my financial data safe? When I created GPT, we had that conversation. Make sure you're taking off that data toggle within your, if you are using Chat GPT, make sure that you might want to talk through that real quick. What's the steps? You go to data settings and then data
Yeah, so you click on your little icon in the corner, where, like, mine doesn't have a
or settings. Yeah.
photo.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, you go to settings and then data controls.
And then toggle that off. So
Hmm.
it's a simple turn off, but just want to make sure we're calling that out every time we do these webinars. I think safety and security and trust is a big question, and a fear of why people aren't doing it. They're just not sure how to make sure that they're taking steps. If you have questions on that, like I said, we're going to talk about getting time with Tyler or myself, and we can talk through it more.
Yeah.
All right, let's move it forward here. We're kind of getting close to the end of our session here. We wanted to give some, operationalizing this. This is one thing, like, as we ran all of our projects, I would say throughout all of my 30 years experience in tech, it's not as always so hard to get the planning. I mean, that's hard. The budgeting, the resource planning. We're going to talk about resource planning next week, but putting it into action. And some of the tools that we just talked about that allow you to have live dashboards are wonderful. The amount of time it can take to just put on uh, gathering your targets, goals, and metrics. We talked about that in our webinar last week. How do I track that? How do I track our financial data? Making sure you have a balanced scorecard that's showing everything that you're doing. And the financials should be one of those areas that you're looking at, right? Um, so you want to be looking at the right targets and metrics for how we're tracking our financials ongoing. And to Tyler's point just a moment ago, being able to catch those things sooner than later. And so to put that into place, um, putting in the operational meetings to have those reviews, making sure it's standardized within your organization as far as how are we collecting data, who's collecting it, are we analyzing it, where are we using AI, how are we reviewing those insights as an organization, that collaboration piece,
Hmm.
realigning, are we on target to our strategy, do we need to realign, getting ideas for suggestions on how we do that. But that implementation piece, that putting those operational processes in place and monitoring. You don't, we'll say this over and over again, you don't set once and then forget it. You need to set it and track it ongoing. And I think with AI, what we're finding is we have to do this more frequently, and we can do it more easily with AI to have these frequent feedback loops to be able to make adjustments faster and readjust in more agile approach, right, to budget and execution.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot more disruptive technologies that come into the picture. In every industry, there's going to be situations where midway through your fiscal year, you're going to have some huge thing that comes up. Oh, our competitors are using this technology yet that we did not, maybe we saw it and we underestimated the impact that it would have in our industry. But now we need to take that seriously before, long before we're doing our planning for next year. It's only halfway through. So big opportunities on a much shorter cycle.
And I think that's why we're finding organizations are reaching out to groups like Tyler and I and others, that this group of practitioners that are staying on top of these AI technologies, because it is moving so fast. You kind of have to have that secondary insight into, okay, what should we be considering now? And so just really looking at that on a more frequent basis and staying on top of it, and making sure that you're seeing where we're going, right? It's exciting times, hugely opportunistic times, and also I think everybody's a little overwhelmed, and so we're trying to help with that a little bit.
Yeah.
So I think we're at time here, and want to just do, a recall again of your AI transformation offers. Get time with Tyler, reach out to us at Rise Next, book that time for your session. Just ask all the questions that maybe have coming up today, still unsure, or you have ideas like how to integrate it. Reach out to us. We're here to help. And then before the end of the year, take advantage of this opportunity to get up to 50% of your team trainings reimbursed. Again, two huge opportunities that, I know a lot's going on with the holidays and stuff, but get those in before the end of the year and set you up for success as we move into 2025.
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts I have on this. Sometimes you might ask the question like, "Oh, like this is scary. I don't want to do this yet," or maybe we're not ready for this, or maybe this, maybe it would be too soon to have this consult. Like we want to help you as soon as possible. I think that, one thing that you don't want is to kind of get jerked around by either your board or your boss or your clients, where they're like, hey, we want to work with companies that are doing their AI transformation. Like we want to work with companies that are as effective as they can be, or we want to work with companies that give us a faster turnaround time or offer us this higher level of quality, or whatever it is. Like you don't want to get to the point where you're having to be reactive with this. I think that the best thing you can do is be proactive, and there's so many very inexpensive, very easy things to do in every single company to take advantage of that 10% to 20% productivity boost by just starting the conversation and starting to work through some of these easy low-hanging fruits.
Absolutely. I had a funny response. I don't know if it was in the first or second session. We were talking about the fact that either you're on the AI train or you're getting run over by the AI train. And somebody messaged me and they're like, Trina, I'm on the train. I'm going. They're like, we're going, right? And it's exciting to hear people get excited like that. Like, I'm on the AI train. I know we're starting from where I'm at and we're moving forward. And that's what we want to help with. So
That's great.
I think that we're excited to be able to launch this one today. Next week, we're going to be doing resource planning. So how do we have the right people? How do we start to look at that from an execution standpoint? So that's another one not a lot of people think about within strategic planning, but an important one from a staffing. You're saying we mentioned layoffs. So how do we do this the right way? And then one other exciting thing I want to announce here is that we're also doing live events. This is another big push forward in creating as much awareness as we can in AI and the opportunities. We'll be doing a live event December 5th. It will be in Orem, Utah. And so we're excited to get that launched. We'll be doing our masters in AI. We're bringing in an incredible panel to come in and talk about all things from basic understanding from machine learning to AI, data and security, employee engagement considerations, and startup. We have some fun startup AI companies that we're partnering with that are going to be part of this. So stay tuned. Follow us on all the channels on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on Instagram. We're looking to help as many people as we can to help us spread the word. So with that, we'll wrap it up for today. Thanks everybody for being here, and we'll talk to you next time.